Honourable Senators, welcome back. Attorney General. There was to be some discussions with you and Senator Mark.
Yes, Madam Chair. I'm awaiting instructions in relation to some of the proposals.
Okay.
May I humbly recommend that in the meanwhile, we still have a little time, that we consider, Madam Chair, we've had an opportunity on the government's end to consider improving the language to the clauses which we stood down whenever you get to them, 4, 5, and 6. Sorry, 4, 6, and 8.
Yeah.
And we potentially have a solution to those.
Yes. So we will go in the chronological order. Clause 4.
Clause 4. Clause 4.
Yes, Madam Chair. Should it please you, we had two recommendations in Clause 4 to really look at. The first one was with respect to the definition of law enforcement, and in the proposal for the insertion of the paragraph F in law enforcement, what was originally circulated included a protective service agency as defined under the Supplemental Police Act. Senator Ramdeen, Senator Choate expressed the view that because of the unregulated aspect of the corporations that may be involved there, that we limit ourselves instead to the constable aspects. So in those circumstances, we're proposing that we use instead the following words. So F would read as follows.
Okay, so you are amending F.
That, yes, ma'am,
Okay.
that which was circulated, and we're amending it by reading instead a constable. So we're striking the words a protective service agency, and we're just inserting instead there a constable, and the rest would continue as defined under the Supplemental Police Act, colon, and, which is circulated there. So,
Semicolon.
forgive me, semicolon. So that removes the offending bit, which was the companies which could have been brought to life under protective service agency. We propose that in the definition of school, that we delete the word an orphanage and substitute the words, are you ready? A community residence, comma, as defined under the capital C, children, apostrophe S, so that's children's, community residences, capital C, capital R, comma, foster care, capital F, capital C, and Nurseries Act, capital N, capital E. And what I could say for the benefit of members is that a community residence as defined under that act includes the two categories, a children's home and a child rehabilitation center. So that takes care of the observation from my learned colleague, Senator Ramdeen, which I thank him for. Those would therefore be in the round the amendments that we propose to Clause 4, subject to honourable members' consideration.
Honourable Senators. Any comments on the proposed amendments to Clause 4? Okay. So, Honourable Senators, there is the Attorney General had circulated an amendment to Clause 4, and he's seeking a further amendment. So, Clause 4 will be amended. If we look at the Attorney General's amendment, further amended at sub 2, after paragraph E, insert the following new paragraph, F. remove the words "a protective service agency" and substitute "a constable." So it will now read "a constable as defined under the Supplemental Police Act." Okay? And then further amended at school, which will now, school includes, if we go to the Parent Act, the bill, school includes, delete the words "an orphanage" and substitute the following words. School includes a community residence as defined under the Children's Community Residences, Foster Care and Nurseries Act.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah? Any questions or comments? Senator Richards.
To the AG, do these changes, these amendments, also cover, based on your knowledge, situations where authorized persons take children in their care out to locations which may not be covered in this?
I see. So, a school bus which goes to X place, you mean in that circumstance?
That sort of circumstance.
No, it does not. What the law seeks to capture is the traditional places, the gang members that may be predators hanging on and around schools at particular locations. And more particularly with the improvements that we've just added in for children's homes and child rehabilitation centers. Those lads and lasses, as they used to be called under YODA, the Young Offenders Detention Act, those lads and lasses who are prone to being indoctrinated into gang activity. So it does not specifically include the field trips and other areas.
Do any of our existing pieces of legislation cover those, given the fact that we have to understand that gang leaders are becoming increasingly creative, and we want to be able to cover as much as possible? It will never be perfect, as you rightly say on many occasions. Situations where children constantly go to certain locations for field trips and may be vulnerable in those circumstances, although it may be for a limited time.
Regrettably, no, because the occasion of school excursions is unpredictable and goes from school to school. One of the tenets of draft, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, through you, of course. One of the tenets of drafting is that there must be certainty in the interpretation of the law. So it was a little bit difficult to chain that aim inside of wording which would catch that, lest it be too broad a perspective.
Appreciate it.
Honourable Senators, the question is that Clause 4 be amended as circulated by the Attorney General and further amended as follows. At subclause 2, F, delete the words "a protective service agency" and substitute the words "a constable." And under the definition of school, delete the words "an orphanage" and substitute "a community residence" as defined under the Children's Community Residences, Foster Care and Nurseries Act. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honourable Senators, the question is that Clause 4, as amended, now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 4, as amended, now stands part of the bill.
Clause 6.
Attorney General.
Madam Chair,
Just to remind you that
we did 1 and 2.
6.1 and 6.2, no, 6.3 have already been approved.
Yes, Madam Chair. I was under the impression that 2 was approved, but that 3 was not. So 2 is where we dealt with gang leader.
We made no change to 2.
Correct. So I was under the view that it was accepted.
No.
It wasn't.
There were concerns raised about the
Formula for-
sentence, yes.
Right. And then, Madam Chair, we went away to look at 3.
No, we actually approved 3.
Correct, because he had
Yes, you remember a person who, all right, members, please, I'm sorry, this is quite difficult and it's hard to concentrate with the noise, okay? At 3, we had amended 3 and approved it.
Would you mind reading what 3 was amended to, Madam Chair?
Sure. A person who commits an offense under subsection 1B, C, or D is liable in the case of a first offense on summary conviction to imprisonment for 10 years, and in the case of a subsequent offense on conviction to imprisonment for 20 years.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
You took off the words on indictment.
was in the initial.
Yes, ma'am.
No, but I will see that if changes are to be made for the flow of clause 6, then let's deal with it.
No, Madam Chair, I'm fine with that.
With 3?
Yes,
Okay.
I was just under a mistaken view, and I'm corrected.
Okay.
Okay? So,
Yes.
so Madam Chair, we only had subclause 2 then, so far, and then 4 and 5, which flew, correct?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. In respect of subclause 2, that's 6.2, Madam Chair, we looked at the debate. There were very good recommendations coming from a learned colleague, Senator Ramdeen, and Senator Small, and others, expressed as to putting a higher, more draconian maximum sentence, and the recommendation was for natural life. Unfortunately, we also have to consider, or rather I should say, we are obliged to consider the very cogent argument offered by my learned colleague Senator Choate that it may be viewed to be an excessive criminalization if we were to go to that particular standard. And there was very compelling advocacy on her part that we should take this thing in a graduated step. Madam Chair, adding to that dynamic, whilst I may be at first blush happy to go to the further extent of natural life, specifically because of A, the fact that there is a discounting of sentencing, B, because there is an application of time served, C, because prison years, 8 months and not 12 months, D, because you may have discounts which are up to 2/3 in some instances, depending upon how an accused is treated, thereby rendering the 25 years quite minimal. Notwithstanding all of that, the fact that this has a sunset clause attached to the bill, we would probably run into some difficulty. I referred back to members of the caucus, which caused me to come here with the view, and the recommendation coming from us is to leave the structure as is. But I want to say that in the period whilst we analyze this law, with the sunset coming upon us in 30 months' time, we will certainly be looking at this from a graduated step. There is compelling argument on the part of Senator Ramdeen, which I associate myself with. I understand the rationale, but I'm not in a position to move to the higher marker just yet. So I will take Senator Mark's caution that we leave the maximum sum as at 25 years. In those circumstances, Madam Chair, I propose that subclause 2, 6.2, remain as is.
And let us now move on to the amendments circulated by you for subclause 4.
Yes, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, subclause 4, as circulated by me, was a reformulation of wording born about because we had caused an amendment to the definition of law enforcement authority, and that specifically was just addressed. The concern which came up in accepting subclause 4 was because of the inclusion of protective services under the Supplemental Police Act, which we've now modified in manner suggested by honourable senators. In those circumstances, therefore, this simplified definition, simplified subclause is now in order from my point of view, for acceptance by honourable senators. So I propose that subclause 4 as circulated be considered for acceptance by the Honourable Senate.
Senator Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Chair. AG, I know Senator Ramdeen would have raised concerns regarding the persons involved in the intelligence gathering part of this.
Yes,
subclause.
that's correct.
So we're not moving any amendment with regards to that.
We tried to look at finding a definition for intelligence gathering, and we couldn't because of the structure of the SSA in particular, where they use contract officers or human intelligence operatives that are given associative cover by the DPP or under the Witness Protection Program or as informants or as undercover agents. So we found it hard to try and come up with the definition of what investigative personnel would look like.
Having regard to Senator Ramdeen's concern of how wide this, the wording of this can be and the amount of persons it could capture, would you be minded if we can remove that part regarding the intelligence gathering persons? And just leave the law enforcement authority, because it's very wide.
Coming out, if I may, Madam Chair, coming out of the dicta of Mr. Justice of Appeal Nolan Barrow in the Kevin Stewart matter, the learned judge reflected quite properly that anti-gang convictions are no slam dunk and certainly require investigative work, and it is a feature that investigative work is going to require witness evidence, and witness evidence is best done by way of years of working through human intelligence. That's part of the dicta. For those purposes, I ask honourable senators to bear in mind that in subclause 4 we're seeking to penalise persons who are clothed, quote unquote, with law enforcement cover from acting as gang members. And in those circumstances, we'd want it to be such that they are not exculpated out of the matrix. Where next this concept comes up is where we deal with retaliatory action, but it's not quite in the same formula. But we do believe that notwithstanding the breadth of the clause, the breadth of the phrase intelligence gathering personnel, that it should in fact be there.
Okay.
Okay.
You believe that it would be there, AJ?
Yes, sir. Is there a contrary view?
Yeah, I want to support my colleague, Senator Saddam Hussain. Madam Chair, through you, the AG, there is no definition on the interpretation section of the intelligence gathering agencies. So we don't know what agencies are involved here. All we are getting is a broad definition of intelligence gathering. Unless the Attorney General is prepared to give us a definition for intelligence gathering agencies, or what that means, I am afraid that we wouldn't be able to support this particular measure that the Attorney General is advancing.
Senator Mark, may I point out, it's not intelligence gathering agency. It's
Person.
a person or intelligence gathering. A person involved in law enforcement or intelligence gathering, which is different from intelligence gathering agency.
Thank you for guiding me. But in any event, we are including personnel who engage in intelligence gathering. And this is where I have to conclude, AG, through the chair, that the SSA might be involved in this.
Yes.
Special branch
Yes.
might be involved in this. The Army and the police have their own intelligence agencies and bodies. They might be involved. So what I'm saying is that, is it possible, AG, through the chair, to give us an appreciation of these intelligence gathering mechanisms that you probably would want us to consider in this exercise?
Madam Chair, the rationale, the mischief that my learned friend is pointing to can be addressed by the literal interpretation of person involved in intelligence gathering. This subclause says, where a member of a law enforcement authority, and that's defined, effectively police, etc., as we define it in the definitions clause, or a person involved in intelligence gathering commits an offense under this section, he is liable to conviction on indictment to the 25 years. So we're seeking to treat with putting an offense upon somebody who will have to be demonstrated by the prosecution to be someone who was acting for the other side, someone who was there dealing with intelligence gathering in a normal sense, human intelligence as a plant, feeding information back to the police, etc. So that evidential burden upon the prosecutor to demonstrate that this person fits the category of the offense is the first point. Secondly, intelligence gathering within that construct is something which must be proved. Here was the contract, the person worked for so, we had this evidence, he was in the police, the person may well be a member of the SSA or hired by the SSA or the TTDF or the TTPS, as it may be. So the need to actually move away from the comfort of the literal interpretation of person involved in intelligence gathering is not so difficult, because we can reside in that comfort there, because really what we're doing is relying upon the prosecution having to prove that this person fit that category. It's proof beyond reasonable doubt, and then that person must be considered to have committed an offense under the Anti-Gang Act, and then that person must, on indictment, at a standard of proof beyond reasonable doubt, in the High Court, be convicted by a jury in this circumstance. So I don't think that the mischief is one which ought to trouble us.
You have some reservations to this, ma'am.
Honorable sentence, the question is that clause 6 be amended as circulated.
We have subclause. Did we do subclause 5, Madam Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
We did already.
No, we didn't.
We deferred. We ought to have deferred it because it used law enforcement authority.
Sure. I apologize. We have to deal with subclause 5. Yes.
Should it please you, Madam Chair? This is the other side of the equation that I just spoke to. So in subclause 4, it's where that trusted person who was on law enforcement end or in the intelligence gathering end acted as a gang member, and we've thrown the book at that person by providing the maximum of 25 years under the formulation for offenses in this bill. In subclause 5, we're saying a gang leader or gang member who, with intent, wounds or causes grievous bodily harm to, or to do some grievous bodily harm, shoots at a member of law enforcement authority or person involved in intelligence, commits an offense and is liable on. And therefore what we're seeing here is that if gang members act against these law enforcement persons, we wish to provide them with a fillip, with an extra tool in their arsenal to allow for the application of a higher standard of penalty to be attracted to them. And in those circumstances, therefore, we just simply provide for the other side of the equation here.
Yeah. No, you were.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. First, I believe there's a or missing in my version.
You're looking at it marked up?
Yes.
Okay, in the bill, I believe that there's an or that is
And
there.
the second thing I'm seeing that the sentence under this provision is 30 years, which is more than the maximum that we prescribed
Yes.
throughout the rest of the
So perhaps we should
legislation.
shift that to 25.
Just for harmonization purposes.
Yes, please, I agree with you.
Okay, but, Madam Chair, you see, I was just thinking that the injury to the law enforcement officers of 30 years is fully justified, because we are sending a signal that anytime you injure the law enforcement officers, you have committed a separate and distinctive, more heinous crime.
I agree, but because we've completed every other clause so far, and we've operated under the belief that our maximum was set at 25 for children, for other areas which we wish to have, for gang leaders, etc., I do agree with Senator Hussain that for harmonization on this occasion that we should go to 25. We certainly really ought to look at the very philosophy of higher penalties as proposed by Senator Ramdeen and several other senators on a second occasion. But mind you, we'll be coming quicker pace on this because one expects that we'll be back here before a Parliament prorogues. So, Madam Chair, could I recommend that we go
Instead of 30.
Okay, let me not be too far off of it. If the Senate is okay with the 30-year prescription, subject to your involvement and guidance, Madam Chair, I'm prepared to leave it as it is. It does throw a bit of the harmony a little bit askew, insofar as in other places we've worked with the 25.
Yeah. Madam Chair, can I come in here? You see, I understand the need for harmonization, hence some of the comments I made earlier. But when I saw this 30 years, I thought the intent of the legislation was signaling that we were signaling to all the perpetrators in gangs that the moment you attack a law enforcement officer, there is a different penalty for you. And I was wondering whether you would not even raise that, because I think you need to send a clear signal to the gang leaders that law enforcement officers are in a separate category, and that I wouldn't mind if the AG goes even higher than the 30 years.
May I suggest, having just watched the flag coming from my learned colleague, Senator Hussain, who can correct me if I'm wrong, that we maintain the 30 years?
The reason I raise up the issues regarding the harmonization across the board with respect to the maximum. So if everyone is minded at 30 years, based on Senator Mahabir's submission, I could agree with that.
So shall we leave it as is? Yes. Much obliged, ma'am.
So, Senators, I'm now going to put the question of Clause 6 to the vote. I'm going to ask that everyone pays attention, because I'm now going to go through all the subclauses and read out the amendments.
Per subsection, or
No,
we're going through
I'm
the
now
entire-
going through because
we
we've
did them all
finished.
already.
We've done all of the amendments as circulated to each of the subclauses, and so I am now going to read it out. Are we ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Does anyone want to say anything before I embark on this? Thank you very much. So, honorable senators, the question is that Clause 6 be amended as circulated by the Attorney General and further amended as follows. In 6 subclause 1, by deleting at B the word or, at C, it'll be as professes to be a gang leader or a gang member in order to -1, gain a benefit for himself or another person.
No, Madam Chair. Sorry. Yeah, that's new D.
You see why I told you? Yeah.
So after you delete O, then you insert in 6(1) new subclause C. So you have a new subclause C that comes in here.
Okay, and where is that?
No, this we took on the floor. We took
Right,
the
so you will have to read it for me. Let me just put it. Okay, so here it goes again. At 6(1), at B, by deleting the word or. Am I correct there?
insert new
Insert
subclause
a new subclause C, which reads as follows.
performs an act as a condition
Performs an act as a condition
for membership
for membership in a gang, semicolon, or C, D, professes to be a gang leader or a gang member in order to -1, gain gain a benefit for himself or another person. 2, intimidate other persons, comma. Or 3, or promote a gang, or promote a gang,
Promote a gang,
comma,
commits an offense.
commits an offense. Yes. Yeah? And then we go to 3. Subclause 3. A person who commits an offense under subsection 1B, comma, C or D, comma, is liable in the case of a first offense, comma, on summary conviction to imprisonment for 10 years, and in the case of a subsequent offense, comma, on conviction to imprisonment for 20 years. At 4, it would be as was circulated by the Attorney General, and 5, as circulated by the Attorney General. That's it. Yeah? So, honorable senators, the question is that clause 6 be amended. Those in favor, as I have just set out, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Clause 6 as amended now stands. The question is that clause 6 as amended now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Clause 6 as amended now stands part of the bill.
Clause 8.
Attorney General.
Madam Chair, Senator Ramdeen had recommended, and we agree, that we insert a definition for relative. In those circumstances, Madam Chair, after subclause 2, as it appears in the bill, we propose the insertion of a new subclause 3. May I, with your leave,
Yes.
read it out? 3, and it begins, for the purposes of this section, comma, open quotations, relative with a common R, close quotations, means, comma, in relation to a person, dash, next line, A, his parent, comma, step-parent, or guardian, semicolon. Next line, B, his spouse, comma, cohabitant, or fiancé, semicolon. C, his child, comma, stepchild, or other dependent, semicolon. D, his brother, comma, sister, comma, stepbrother or stepsister, semicolon. E, his grandparent, semicolon. Or, finally, F, any other person responsible for the person's care and support. Full stop.
Circulated ones. Yeah?
Yes, please.
Yes, no, I'll read it over in a little while. Let me read it now, just to confirm it. It'll be subclause 3. For the purposes of this section, comma, relative means in relation to a person, dash, A, his parent, comma, step-parent or guardian, semicolon, B, his spouse, comma, cohabitant or fiancé, semicolon, C, his child, comma, stepchild or other dependent, semicolon, D, his brother, comma, sister, comma, stepbrother or stepsister, semicolon, E, his grandparents, semicolon, or F, any other person responsible for the person's care and support. Yeah?
Grandparent, yes.
His grandparent.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Okay, singular, okay. Attorney General, you did circulate, though,
Yes, ma'am.
some other amendments to clause 8.
Yes, ma'am. And, Madam Chair, in
Yes,
terms of explanation, we
Yes.
had agreed that the first insertion of intentionally
yes.
was to take care of observations by the Law Association and the need for an express statement of a mens rea, mental element to the offense,
Yes,
and specifically bringing to life the recommendations by my learned colleague, Senator Shriki Soon. We had included the new subparagraph H, that is 1H, which is the refusing to provide funding or resources to a gang leader, gang member, or gang. And those in the round would be the full recommendations with the insertion of the new subclause 3, which is for the definition of relative.
so honorable senators, the question is that clause 8 be amended as circulated by the Attorney General and further amended at subclause 3 by inserting subclause 3, which reads as follows: for the purposes of this section, relative means in relation to a person, dash, A, his parent, comma, step-parent or guardian, semicolon, B, his spouse, cohabitant or fiancé, semicolon, C, his child, stepchild or other dependent, semicolon, D, his brother, comma, sister, comma, stepbrother or stepsister, semicolon, E, his grandparent, semicolon, or F, any other person responsible for the person's care and support. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. The ayes have it. Honorable Senators, the question is that clause 8, as amended, now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Clause 8, as amended, now stands part of the bill.
Preamble.
Schedule. I think so. Attorney General, before I put the question on the preamble, what is the decision with respect to the first schedule?
I've just had a look at my instructions that have come in while I was sitting here. Madam Chair, Senator Mark asked for the first schedule to be revisited, and my instructions are that we have completed the first schedule already. I don't know if Senator Mark wishes to put onto the record any concerns in relation to that, far be it that the rationale is not understood.
Senator Mark?
Madam Chair, we have been going very good for the evening. But if the Attorney General and his government has decided to insert a number of new provisions that the House of Representatives never agreed to, and we have sought to ask him to revisit those, and he has taken the line that he has taken, then they will stand the consequences. Because we are not prepared to support this legislation in its current form. We have made it very clear that we are prepared to cooperate, and we are going along very nicely. A number of provisions were introduced under Schedule 1 that the House of Representatives knew nothing about. I drew it to his attention, and I asked him if he could consider revisiting those areas that the House of Representatives did not consider. He indicated to me that he was prepared to look at them. Now he come with a new story that the matter has been closed and he's not prepared to revisit it. Well, so be it. If he wants to go down that road, that's it.
Let me just, Attorney General, Senator Mark, members, we are almost close to concluding our deliberations in committee. I will suspend the committee for 10 minutes to allow for some dialogue.
Before you suspend, Madam Chair, respectfully, my learned colleague, and this is a very quick one, my learned colleague asked that we specifically remove the economic crimes, money laundering, proceeds of crime, prevention of corruption. Those are the matters that concern Senator Mark after we completed and entirely agreed to all of those. I undertook to seek instructions. I told Senator Mark I would look at it. I'm quite frankly shocked at the position because the argument by the entire Senate, including the opposition, was that we move beyond street gangs. We specifically include the opportunity to catch Mr. Big, that we allow the ability to get prevention of corruption, money laundering, proceeds of crime. Those are the matters that my learned friend now wishes to take off the floor. And, Madam Chair, that is the opposite of the 3 days of debate that we had. Further, when we dealt with the committee stage at Schedule 1, everybody agreed, including the opposition, to the inclusion of those things for the reasons that we've all discussed. Senator Choate was very passionate, all senators, independent and opposition senators, that this law must be more than street gangs. And we asked for electronic crimes, we asked for proceeds of crime, we asked for corruption, we specifically spoke about gang leaders who are involved in other activities and the prosperity which they gain. So I had to put it clearly onto the record that it was that sudden position. I would love to facilitate my friend at all opportunities, but that runs against the grain of 3 days of work and specifically the 9 hours we've spent in committee stage where there was an adamant purpose that we go more than just street gang. And it is in those circumstances, Madam Chair, that we may perhaps take the break. I don't know if anybody on the rest of the bench's views wish to be heard on this point.
Madam President, I do not want to engage my colleague at any length. The reality is this is a very sensitive piece of legislation. The House of Representatives approved the legislation with 29 items under the schedule. The Attorney General has introduced more from 29 to 46. I have asked him, based on what I have looked at, to reconsider these things. Let the House of Representatives have their say on this matter.
No, we have to go back to the House. Madam Chair, if I just put it there, 2 separate houses, as my learned colleague, Senator Mark, reminded us all day long and over the last 3 days. This is the Senate. The House produced a purpose. In our bicameral system, the House does its work. It comes to the Senate does its fulminations. If the philosophy is that this Senate must accept only that which the House brought, Senator Mark asked me a while ago on the record whether I consulted with the Leader of the Opposition. And I had to remind Senator Mark that I provided the draft of this law and the amendments days in advance, not only in the confused state of what amendments look like on a small slip of paper, but in the context of a marked up track change version of the bill. And I reminded Senator Mark on the record that it is for each bench to do its own caucusing and that I could not dare caucus on behalf of the opposition with the opposition members. So in those circumstances, there's been days of positioning. But I don't think we need to go too much further, Madam Chair. I don't know if there are other voices on this point.
Does anyone else wish to say anything? Senator Mahabir?
Yeah. Madam Chair, I personally think that the money crimes, money laundering and so on, are very important crimes to include. The concern I had with item number 31, misbehavior in public office, is that it was very broad, and I did not wish at all to be party to any legislation which was going to be used to harass, say, members of parliament who are alleged to be misbehaving in public office. And I just wanted to ask the Attorney General whether he would restrict misbehavior in public office by state employees and leave it at that. So we look at customs officers, police officers as of this time, so that the potential for abuse and the concerns by others can be somehow mitigated at this time.
Senator Small.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am of the view that cutting the provisions that deal with financial crime will go to the heart of this legislation. Madam President, my record here during my few interactions here in this Parliament I have demonstrated and provided data the fact that we have a serious problem in this country with financially related crime. It's a serious problem. And I think that any opportunity to allow the forces that are doing the investigations to have full access and to be able to charge people accordingly, we should give them, because financial crime, as I've said on the record here, white-collar crime doesn't seem to exist in Trinidad and Tobago. We're still waiting on the first prosecutions and convictions, and I want to be able to make sure that those who are doing the investigations and who are going to be doing the prosecutions have the fullest, all the tools available to them in the armory.
I know I have made this point before, but one of the basic things about the prosecution of crimes like these is that you follow the money. And I think that was the lacuna in the bill which was brought to the upper house, because while I believe the Proceeds of Crime Act had been referred to, the large majority of offenses relating to financial crimes and possible misconduct by state agencies had not been taken into account. And I think as a policy, this Honorable House seem to have agreed that we thought it best to follow the money. And it is in that context that other offenses were included. That is my understanding of the process that we embarked upon and hopefully are close to the conclusion of.
May I indicate simply the following? We have no objection to 1 to 28 in Schedule 1. We including them. We are including 30. We are including 34 to 46. Those are in. The rest that I didn't mention are out. And we ask the Attorney General to look at those.
So that is offences under the offences under the Prevention of Corruption Act.
Those areas that I've not mentioned.
No, just for the record. We are not revisiting the schedule thus far, but we are taking people's comments on board. For the information of the Attorney General, Senator Mark, could you just run through which of these offenses you wanted to have deleted?
Yes, Madam.
Okay, let me just see. Offenses under the Prevention of Corruption Act. You felt that should not be included.
I was going to exclude 29
Yes?
to 46, the entire list.
The entire list.
Yeah,
That's not just.
from 29 to 46. But in an effort to have a compromise, I told the Attorney General that we are prepared to go, we are supporting 1 to 28. We ask him to leave out 29.
Which is offences against prevention
We
of
ask
corruption.
him to leave out 31.
Misbehavior in public office,
32.
gambling and betting,
This one's captured, 33 is captured under the all these things are captured under various pieces of
All right.
legislation.
Honorable Senators, Senator Richards, you wanted to say something?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't see how we can in good conscience seek to put provisions in place in so many other areas, as we've said before, for the what has been described, sorry, let me get my grammar right, as low-level criminals, and seek to absolve the parts of this list that deal specifically with white-collar crime that has been at the source of the bane of the existence of fueling gang activity in Trinidad and Tobago. So if we do that, we might as well forget the whole process, because we'll be just going back to square one.
Senator Crease.
Madam Chair, my concern coming into this process was that this legislation seemed to have a class bias in that it was targeting crime on the street, and it was lending to the impression that that crime on the street operates in a vacuum, that it is not part of a wider criminal enterprise. Good? So that much of the violence that we are afraid of emanates from the idle time of those hoodlums who are part of a larger purpose. And I felt that from 29 to 46 encapsulated that wider criminal enterprise. And I'm pleased with the work of the AG in this regard.
Senator, I will take one last comment from Senator Ramkisoon.
And just, yes, a very quick comment, Madam President. I just wanted to, Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say I also share the view that 1 to 46 are all gang-related activities in Trinidad and Tobago.
All right. Honorable Senators, I am still going to suspend this committee for 10 minutes, and we will resume in 10 minutes' time.
Join us on the Parliament channel and the Parliament Radio 105.5 FM on Friday, 13th April 2018 at 10 a.m. for a live broadcast of the 21st meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs. At this meeting, the committee will convene an inquiry into certain aspects of the National Insurance System of Trinidad and Tobago with officials of the National Insurance Board and the Ministry of Finance. You can also view a live stream of this meeting on our YouTube channel, ParlView. For more information, visit our website at www.ttparliament.org and follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram.
Tell us what you think. The Joint Select Committee established for the Constitution Amendment Tobago Self-Government Bill 2018 wants to hear from you. The bill seeks to make changes to the constitutional arrangements between Tobago and Trinidad and will have an impact on such things as the right to self-determination for the people of Tobago, to increase the island's annual appropriation to no less than 8% of the national budget, and to establish a Tobago Executive Council and a Tobago Service Commission. Tell us, do you support self-governance for Tobago? What are your major concerns? How will both islands be affected? What benefits do you hope to realize from self-governance? What could the committee address in its inquiry? And who do you think we could speak to? So tell us what you think. Submissions can be sent to the Secretary, JSC Constitution Amendment Tobago Self-Government Bill 2018, Level 3, Tower D, Ryson Road, Port of Spain, or via email to tobagoselfgov@ttparliament.org. Go to the Quick Access section of the Parliament's homepage to access more information on the bill at ttparliament.org. The printed version of the bill will be available in limited quantities at libraries across the country.
heart of Port of Spain, a small but significant structure can be found tucked away on Sackville Street. This seemingly innocuous little building is one of the few remaining examples of our Spanish architectural heritage and likely part of our governmental history. It is believed to have belonged to the illustrious board of the Cabildo, an administrative council that existed during Spanish colonial rule. When Trinidad was a colony of Spain, the Cabildo exercised wide executive powers, but were mainly responsible for the governance of the bigger towns.
It was a small council of partly elected, partly appointed gentlemen. You had to be male, you had to be white, you had to be a Christian, a Catholic Christian, and you had to own some property in the city. Those were the requirements.
In 1797, when the British seized power from Spain, Governor Colonel Thomas Picton chose not to abolish the Cabildo. On old maps of Port of Spain, this building on Sackville Street was labelled the Cabildo. During restoration work, carbon dating confirmed the building was approximately 200 years old. But its actual function continues to be a source of speculation.
Cabildo buildings were probably built in the early 1800s, but definitely Spanish style. The architecture is quite clearly Spanish. And there's good reason to think that the Cabildo did meet in that building.
However, restoration architects have a different opinion. Their examination of the foundations of the Cabildo building found it was once part of a larger complex.
On some of the old maps around 1800, we see it called the Cabildo, but it's far too small a building to have been the headquarters for the illustrious Cabildo. It's no way. So we suspect that it may have been an out office, maybe a registry for birth and deaths, for instance, not necessarily where the Cabildo met, where the town hall was. Or it may have been a building that after one of the fires, because we know that the town hall burnt down more than once, it might have been used as a temporary quarters, which is why we now think of it and it's now called the Cabildo.
So, I mean, it's unlikely that it was the Cabildo. It may have been owned by the Cabildo. It may have been owned by somebody who was senior in the Cabildo, which I strongly suspect. Or maybe the Cabildo had a series of houses for their staff or their councillors or...
Despite speculation on its usage, the building on Sackville Street is undeniably an important example of our Spanish architectural heritage. Built in 1826, the details of the building are typical of domestic urban structures seen in other Spanish colonies.
The Cabildo house is Spanish style. There is a small fountain in the courtyard. It opens directly onto the street, and there are very, very thick walls. There is that whole very Moorish Latin feel to it. And it is one of the examples of Spanish architecture in Trinidad that have survived.
The building is introspective in terms of style and was well designed for the tropics.
It's a delightful space, really. You don't even think that you're going to, when you walk in here, you're going to suddenly come onto an interior courtyard. And if you go again back to Venezuela, Cuba, the floor plan is typical. That you walk in, you pass one or two rooms, and it just opens up in the middle. Tropical architecture, the air comes through the door, it circulates, and it goes up through the middle of the building.
By the 1830s, however, the British wanted to establish firmer control over their colony and set about Anglicizing Trinidad, making laws and institutions more British. As they began bringing an end to slavery, they came up against strong resistance from the Cabildo.
Now, the Cabildo, stuffed with slaveholders, used the institution to fight tooth and nail against Britain's slave policies. So for those reasons, plus the fact it was a Spanish institution, clearly its time was limited. It was abolished in 1840 and replaced by an English type of borough council.
The Cabildo building was left abandoned for many years and fell into ruin. It was saved from demolition in the 1980s by the efforts of the Trinidad and Tobago Institute of Architects, spearheaded by Adrian Camp's Campins. Today, the Cabildo building has found new life as a law museum. Handcrafted mesquite furniture was made for the building in 18th century style. A sculpted Spanish-styled fountain was installed where the original fountain stood.
Turning it into the law museum, which has been done, has given it a lift, a boost that is extremely important, and will make people conscious of the importance of, the restoration of old buildings.
Many of Port of Spain's historical structures from 200 years ago have been destroyed by fire or urbanization over the centuries. This is why the Cabildo is so important in our architectural landscape.
Even though this building that we call the Cabildo was built during the early part of the British era, it is the only thing we have left of Spanish influence in Port of Spain. So it's important to keep it, to remind us that we do have a Spanish heritage, and that the Spaniards were here before the British came.
Now a listed heritage site, this small but significant building is a link to our Spanish colonial past. With its new function as home to the Law Museum,
Leader of Government Business.
With standing orders 14.5, I beg to move that the Senate continue to sit until the completion of the business at hand.
Honourable Senators, the question is that the Senate continue to sit until the completion of the business at hand. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. This Senate will continue to sit until the completion of the business at hand. Honourable Senators, the committee stage will now resume.
Madam Chair, I thank you for allowing the House some room to settle itself, the Senate. Really, having heard the views expressed by several members, we're in a rather difficult position. The government's position is that the essence of the contributions in broadening anti-gang activity into the realm of money, Mr. Big, follow the money, prevention of corruption, illegal casinos and gambling, which we know is a proliferation and cohort of gaming, of gang activity. All of these things are critical to making sure this law is broad-based. As Senator Creese put it, that we're not treating with just one end of an equation. We're not being imbalanced. Madam Chair, in all of those circumstances, the government is hard-pressed to refuse the invitation of my learned colleague, Senator Mark, to revisit the first schedule, which was agreed to unanimously by all members just a little while ago.
Honourable Senators, in light of all that I have heard, we will not be revisiting the first schedule. Senator Mark.
Madam Chair, I'm very disappointed in the Attorney General and his attempt to give what I would want to call the wrong impression to you and to this Honourable Senate. Why would the government not want to engage the opposition as it relates to addressing some of the concerns that I have brought to his attention. One can only assume, Madam Chair, that the government has its own agenda and the government is on some mischief-making program.
Okay, well, Senator Mark, I have to stop you here because you are imputing improper motives and the standing orders are still in operation, even though we are in committee.
Well, let me withdraw that.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
And I think that, I don't think that any more time should be spent on this. We had gone through painstakingly a process and we have reached a certain point. You did ask for it to be revisited, but based on everything that I have heard, it seems that revisiting will not provide any different outcome from what we had painstakingly gone through before. Okay? So it is my wish that we move on at this stage. Your comments have been noted, and I think we should move on now. I think we just have to deal with the preamble.
The preamble.
The question is that the preamble to the bill be approved. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The preamble to the bill is approved. Honourable Senators, the question is that the bill as amended be now reported to the Senate. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The bill as amended will now be reported to the Senate. Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam President. Madam President, I wish to report that a bill entitled An Act to Make Provision for the Maintenance of Public Safety and Order through Discouraging Membership of Criminal Gangs and the Suppression of Criminal Gang Activity and for other related matters was considered in committee and was approved with amendment. I now beg to move that the Senate agree with the committee's report pursuant to Standing Order 69-1.
Honourable Senators, the question is that this Senate agree with the committee's report on a bill entitled An Act to Make Provision for the Maintenance of Public Safety and Order through Discouraging Membership of Criminal Gangs and the Suppression of Criminal Gang Activity and for other related matters. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Make Provision for the Maintenance of Public Safety and Order through Discouraging Membership of Criminal Gangs and the Suppression of Criminal Gang Activity and for other related matters be forthwith read a third time and passed pursuant to Standing Order 69-2.
Honourable Senators, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Make Provision for the Maintenance of Public Safety and Order through Discouraging Membership of Criminal Gangs and the Suppression of Criminal Gang Activity and for other related matters be now read a third time and passed. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. This bill requires a special majority and therefore the clerk will conduct a division.
Mr. Franklin Khan?
Yes.
Mrs. Paula Gopiskun?
Yes.
Mrs. Jennifer Baptiste Primus?
Yes.
Mr. Clarence Rambrat?
Yes.
Mr. Ruhan Sinanan?
Yes.
Mr. Kazim Hussein?
Yes.
Mr. Robert Lehunt?
Yes.
Dr. Lester Henry,
Yes.
Mr. Avinash Singh,
Yes.
Mr. Nigel De Freitas, Mr. Daniel Duki,
Yes.
Mr. Ronald Hoggins,
Yes.
Miss Alicia Romano,
Yes.
Miss Ayana Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Ndale Young,
Yes.
Mr. Wade Mark,
Yes.
Miss Anita Haynes,
Yes.
Miss Khadija Amin,
Yes.
Mr. Saddam Hussein,
Yes.
Mr. Taharka Obika,
Yes.
Mr. Gerald Ramdeen, Dr. Danisha Mahabir,
Yes.
Mr. H.R. Ian Roach,
Yes.
Mr. David Small,
Yes.
Mr. Torel Shrikisoon,
Yes.
Miss Melissa Ramkisoon,
Yes.
Miss Sophia Choate SC,
Yes.
Mr. Stephen Crease,
Yes.
Miss Jennifer Rafful,
Yes.
Mr. Paul Richards.
A resounding affirmative, yes.
Honorable Senators, the results of the division are as follows. 29 members voted for the bill, no members voted against, and no one abstained.
A bill entitled An Act to Make Provision for the Maintenance of Public Safety and Order through Discouraging Membership of Criminal Gangs and the Suppression of Criminal Gang Activity and for other related matters.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move that the Senate do now adjourn to Tuesday, the 17th of April, 2018, at 10 a.m. During that sitting, we plan to take through all its stages, the evaluation of land bill, and hopefully to start and possibly complete the property tax bill. I also want to put the Senator on notice that we would be meeting also on Thursday the 20th, Thursday the 19th of April at 2 p.m.
Honorable Senators, before I put the question on the adjournment, leave has been granted for two matters to be raised on the motion for the adjournment of the Senate. Senator Obika.
Madam President, I thank you for acknowledging me as I rise to bring to light the failure of the government to develop on any plan for the tourism sector, as evidenced by the lamentations of the Trinidad Hotels and Restaurants and Tourism Association regarding the declining hotel occupancy during the carnival season. And before I continue, Madam President, I would like to put on record that all colleagues in this House are my colleagues, and I really believe that the work we do here is important for the development of Trinidad and Tobago, and every action that I engage in is with that in mind. All right? And my brother, you are my brother. All right? So, now, Madam President, the tourism sector under this government has failed. There can be no example of any plan. If you take a cursory glance at newspaper articles and press releases, you realize the gravity of the tourism sector in Trinidad and Tobago. I will just list the headlines now and go into them in detail at the end of the presentation. So we have $700 million loss for Tobago tourism. One headline. Unreliable travel blamed for low Tobago bookings. Another. Tobago hotels face massive cancellations. Another one. TNT tourism on verge of collapse. That was by a St. Lucia newspaper. And then, of course, a media release by the Chamber of Commerce. The first one I want to point to is the Trinidad Hotels, Restaurants, and Tourism Association review of the tourism industry, Madam President. They raised many issues, 7 of which I would like to highlight in my presentation. Number 1, they pointed to the fact that the closure of the Tourism Development Company was a protracted exercise which brought many hardships among the practitioners and the stakeholders in the domestic tourism industry. Number 2, the closure of TDC did not carry the support of private sector tourism stakeholders in Trinidad, which provided extensive recommendations for restructuring of the TDC. They took pains, Madam President, to bring forward recommendations to develop the tourism industry and to keep TDC intact, to TDC and the Ministry of Tourism, and they stated none of which were considered nor adopted by the government. Total neglect. Number 3, an allocation of $16 million was provided to Tourism Trinidad Destination Management Company Limited, but by February 2018, as at that date, no announcement of any executive, any management or staff of this unity was made. I see the new Minister of Tourism is here. He's an old boy of my alma mater, Presentation College. I wish him all the best. But given the poor record of his predecessor, I really am not sure what the Honorable Minister can do in the remaining 28 months that he has, if he sits in the chair so long. Number 4, the cancellation of the contracts of the international advertising and public relations firms, the overseas marketing representatives, in key tourist source markets of the USA and Canada, with no replacement firm being appointed, being installed to focus on destination marketing for 16 months, Madam President. Imagine 16 months of at that time, 28 months. So essentially, they have forsaken the marketing of Trinidad and Tobago, paying lip service by giving Calypso Rose a diplomatic passport, when really and truly you are not putting the systems and structures in place to bring people to Trinidad and Tobago. Number 5, allocations for the Ministry of Tourism shows a 57% reduction, and that's when you use the estimates of 2018. We all know that they don't spend as much. But when you look at the revised estimates for 2017, it's a 69% reduction from 2015. This is not the UNC, Madam President. This is the Trinidad Hotels, Restaurants, and Tourism Association's review of the tourism industry, a data-driven one, might I add. Now, what they pointed to is that the stakeholders in the industry pay much by way of taxes. In fact, the accommodation tax alone stood at $56.81 million in 2017, which was only a 10.5% decline from 2015. All right? So they've been paying a consistent level of taxes to the government. But what did they receive? They received $57.46 million in 2017, which was a significant reduction, as I pointed out before, 69% reduction. Now, Madam President, this is a wholly unfair situation. So we have a situation where the stakeholders in the industry are paying their way. They are bringing persons to the shores, they are paying taxes, and when those persons come, they pay by virtue of bringing foreign exchange, and they support the services of the domestic economy. The contribution of the hotel industry is more than the amount they pay in taxes, but this government can find nothing to do but to reduce the allocation to them. And they also pointed to a direct correlation with the downward trend in international arrivals from 2015, when the partnership were in power under the leadership of Kamala Prasad-Bissessar, to 2017, as a direct result of the reduction in the allocations to the Ministry of Tourism. Now, the Chamber of Commerce even went further. They said that the deleterious impact on the failure to plan for the tourism industry is having a significant negative impact on Trinidad and Tobago's overall economy. All right? Madam President, going forward, this government would do well to look at what happened from 2010 to 2015 as regards tourism. So let's look at what was left for them on a silver platter by the People's Partnership Government. We have, if you go to Cuba, you see the Aquatic Center, the Cycling Velodrome, the Cricket Academy. And as a result of that, there's a hotel, which I'm sure the Minister of Tourism will be very familiar with, in South Trinidad on the Southern Main Road, in South Central Trinidad, that is boasting 100% occupancy. It's located in St. Margaret's. And if you ask the CEO of the hotel, he said that that is directly as a result of the sports tourists that are coming to the plan that was left by the People's Partnership Government in Cuba. And they are lamenting that the government, despite what was done by their predecessors, is doing nothing for sports tourism in this country. Now, domestic tourism is an integral pillar of the tourism sector. And domestic tourism must be supported by an inter-island ferry that works, by a water taxi system that has working water taxis, not the ones that go to Tobago and catch on fire, by PTSC having a proper fleet of buses, and by tourist sites and attractions getting the resources they need, not by cutting the budget to the Ministry of Tourism by 69%, Madam President. Now if we, in the remaining, I believe I have 1 minute remaining. 2 minutes, thank you very much, Madam President. Okay, thank you. What I'm going to do now is just delve into one article. $700 million loss for Tobago tourism.
Wow.
Now, the former minister all extolled the virtues of Tobago, but what the former minister failed to do was show that under her watch, the Ministry of Tourism.
Senator Obika, you now have 1 minute.
Thank you very much. The Ministry of Tourism has failed entirely. Now, Madam President, I don't know what the new minister can say, but all I will say is that he should look to 2010 to 2015 and basically copy and paste, and tourism will be in good hands. Thank you very much.
Minister of Tourism.
Madam President, I want to thank you as recognizing me as the new Minister of Tourism. Madam President, let me take this opportunity to thank the Honorable Prime Minister for his confidence that he has placed in me to take the tourism sector forward. Madam President, as the government embarks on a strategic plan of diversification, the tourism sector has been identified as critical to the achievement of economic growth and sustainable development in Trinidad and Tobago. Tourism has the potential to rejuvenate other sectors of the economy, as it is labor-intensive, employs a multiplicity of skills, provides entrepreneurial opportunities, and has linkages with agriculture, health, manufacturing, and education. In 2017, it is estimated that 394,650 persons visited Trinidad and Tobago, and the associated visitor spend is estimated at 1.8 billion TT dollars. The economic value of the tourism sector is significantly linked to the generation of foreign exchange through the supply of quality tourism goods and services to visitors. Trinidad and Tobago has also strengthened its efforts to foster closer links with cruise lines to encourage increased port calls to this destination. During the recently concluded 2017-2018 cruise season, 96,957 persons visited Trinidad and Tobago, representing a 98.85% increase over the 2016-2017 In 2017, the average visitor spend from cruise arrivals was estimated at 4.5 million TT dollars. Leading the charge for transforming the tourism sector and maximizing its benefits to the national economy is the Ministry of Tourism, which has developed its strategic plan 2018 to 2021. Both the plan and work program are developed within the context of Vision 2030 and in particular under the thematic area 4 titled Building Competitive Businesses. The plan was developed on the basis of consultations with both internal and external stakeholders and lays the foundation for successful partnerships among various stakeholders in the public and private sectors and throughout communities across the country. It conveys a clear understanding of the role and function of the Ministry of Tourism as a key arm of government in contributing to economic transformation. The plan outlines 10 goals. Goal 1, increase air arrivals to 500,000 persons by 2021. Goal 2, increase cruise arrivals by 100,000 persons by 2021. Goal 3, increase visitor revenues by 25%. Goal 4, expand niche-based tourism, including meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibitions, or business tourism, ecotourism, sport tourism, community-based tourism, and event tourism. Goal 5, increase tourism education and awareness. Goal 6, increase investment in tourism plant and infrastructure to improve the quality and quantity of room stock. Goal 7, strengthen and foster an enabling regulatory environment to support the tourism industry development and growth. Goal 8, improve mechanisms for data collection and analysis. Goal 9, improve opportunities for entrepreneurship and business development within the tourism sector. And Goal 10, use new media and technology in marketing and promotion. Madam President, this government clearly understood that the development of the tourism sector required a more strategic approach to long-term competitiveness of the destination. In this regard, after reviewing the institutional arrangements for the regulation and management of the tourism sector which were in place, Cabinet agreed to the dissolution of the Tourism Development Company Limited, to the establishment of a tourism destination marketing and product development company in Trinidad and a similar entity in Tobago, the establishment of a Trinidad and Tobago Tourism Regulatory and Licensing Authority. In further assessing the sector, it was noted that Trinidad and Tobago has 3 distinct destination marketing brands, each with its own suite of product offerings. In Trinidad, it is meetings, incentives, conferences, exhibitions, and it is product-driven. In Tobago, it's leisure-based and market-driven. Destination Trinidad and Tobago is an opportunity to sell the unique experiences of both islands together. The Ministry of Tourism would have oversight of the Trinidad entity, while the Tobago House of Assembly would have oversight of the Tobago entity, and the joint marketing of Destination Trinidad and Tobago will be coordinated through joint arrangements. To this end, we now have in place the Tobago Tourism Agency in Tobago, and in Trinidad, staffing arrangements are being finalized for the Tourism Trinidad Limited. The Ministry of Tourism is also responsible for the implementation of all projects under the PSIP, which includes the responsibility for the management and maintenance of the 5 sites which were previously vested in the HTC, namely the Labre Pitch Lake Visitor Facility and the beach facilities at Maracas, Manzanilla, Las Cuevas, and Vecini. Furthermore, Madam President, government is cognizant of the fact that internationally tourism is a highly competitive business, is seeking to develop mandatory regulations and standards based on industry best practice, which would assist in maintaining a high-quality product in Trinidad and Tobago. Cabinet therefore agreed to the establishment of the Trinidad and Tobago Tourism Regulatory and Licensing Authority. Consultations have been conducted both in Trinidad and Tobago to sensitize and seek feedback, suggestions, and opinions from industry stakeholders and the public on the implementation of the TTT-RLA. Trinidad and Tobago can no longer afford to ignore the positive impact of a properly regulated tourism sector and what it can have on our economic environment. To meet the goals and targets developed for this sector, it is imperative that the country seeks new markets outside of our traditional source markets. At World Travel Market 2017, the Ministry of Tourism was approached by Europe's largest tour operator, Der Touristik, to be the launchpad for a German mega familiarization tour in the Caribbean. This megafam will see the island of Trinidad being included for the first time in the portfolio of Der Touristik, with 115 travel agents visiting the island to be immersed in the destination's culture, sites, and attractions. The entire industry will stand to benefit with pre-planning visits from the tour operator initiating contracts with some 7 accommodation providers. Madam President, one of the major incentives for the tourism sector is the Trinidad and Tobago Tourism Accommodation Upgrade Project. It was developed to assist property owners of Trinidad and Tobago to upgrade their tourism accommodation to a first-class level. The TORP comprises of the following 2 programs: the Trinidad and Tobago Tourism Hotel and Guest House Room Stock Upgrade Program and the upgrade of small approved tourism properties in Trinidad and Tobago. TORP was extended for a period of 3 years, commencing October 2017 to September 2020, and expanded as follows. For the Trinidad and Tobago Tourism Hotel and Guest House Room Stock Upgrade Program, reimbursement of expenditure of cost of work per room increased from 25% to 50%. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam President, increase of the limit from $750,000 to $1.5 million for the upgrade of small approved tourism properties in Trinidad and Tobago. Reimbursement of the expenditure of cost of work per room increased from 20% to 40%. Increase of the limit from $75,000 to $150,000. The Ministry of Tourism regularly consults with its stakeholders to share information and seek feedback on its impending policies and initiatives. So, Madam President, in conclusion, the Ministry of Tourism is actively seeking to improve the contribution of the tourism sector to the gross domestic product, GDP. The Ministry believes that its plans, policies, and programs constitute a comprehensive and cogent economic plan for tourism. And through its execution, it will continue to monetize the tourism industry and increase competitiveness of the destination. Madam President, the tourism sector is in good hands under this government, under this minister, and I thank you.
Senator Mark.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'm glad to see the Minister of National Security here. I thought he was not going to be here this evening, but I'm glad to know that he's here. Please accept my sympathies. Madam President, may I say from the outset that the role of the police in our country is to protect and serve the citizens. They are the first line of defenders as it relates to the rule of law. They must therefore be sensitive and mindful of their role, particularly when women are making reports of domestic violence. Madam President, you would have heard, and the country has witnessed, where many women have perished. And they have perished because of the fact that they were involved in domestic disputes with their other or better half. And in so doing, many of them have gone to the police stations and they have lodged complaints. They have made reports. They have alerted the officers about the imminent dangers that they face. And yet still, Madam President, police officers seem to treat domestic violence as a private matter, as a private affair. And they treat women and the reports that they submit not with the seriousness and urgency that those reports deserve, resulting, Madam President, in scores of women being murdered in this country. So serious was this matter, Madam President, that you remember the massacre that took place in Le Bray some time ago. And the police commissioner had to suspend 3 police officers pending further inquiries and investigation. The truth is that the time has come for us to establish fresh protocols for the police service, to allow the police officers, Madam President, to understand that when women who are victims of domestic violence report to them instances of violence, they ought to take quick and urgent action and measures to safeguard and to protect these women. And even though we know that we have been getting reports that the Minister of National Security would tell us that they are supposed to be trained and they are supposed to respond quickly and swiftly to reports, Madam President, we still find instances, and too many instances, of police lackadaisical reaction to serious reports made to them by women in our country. So this evening, I have brought to the attention of your good self, Honorable President, and through you to the Honorable Minister of National Security. How long he will be with us, we don't know. But the fact of the matter is here, and we would like him to explain to us what action, what new measures, what new initiatives are being taken by the police service through new policies in order to address what can only be described as an epidemic of violence facing our female population in this country. Madam President, so far for 2018, close to 16 women have died at the hands of criminals, because I cannot describe them any other way than criminals who would slaughter and butcher and murder women in this country because of whatever domestic differences they may have. We must never condone that kind of conduct and behavior. Women hold up half of this world. They are responsible for all of us who are here today. They are the mothers, the grandmothers, our sisters, and there has to be almost like a national emergency that the government must embark upon at the level of the police service to bring to the attention of police officers the need for them to take urgent and decisive action in defense of our women folk. When they come and they submit reports and they tell you that their lives are in danger, you do not laugh it off, Madam President. You do not dismiss these women and let them go back home and make up with their husband or their boyfriends. You have to get involved and get out there, and if the culprits who are involved are threatening these women, they must be arrested promptly and charged. And the police must be there to protect our women folk, Madam President. I am very disappointed in the reaction, the conduct, and the behavior of some of our police officers in Trinidad and Tobago, how they have treated reports after reports submitted by women in this country and their poor reaction to those reports. Many women would have been alive today, Madam President, if the police officers would have taken those reports seriously. Abigail Chapman, as an example, might have been alive today if when she made the report to the police station, they had taken action and arrested that particular individual who is now before the courts. And so many other women, Madam President, would have been alive. So this evening, as I said, I call on the Honorable Minister to tell this Honorable Senate what new measures, what new level of protocols are being established in order to sensitize our police officers so that they can react more efficiently and swiftly to the plight of our women folk in Trinidad and Tobago. I speak on behalf of the women of this country today. I come out in defense of the women of this country today. And I plead with the Minister of National Security and the government to take prompt action and measures to avoid, as far as it's practically possible, particularly, Madam President, when they make reports to the police must take action. And when they don't take action, then the commissioner was right to take action against those police officers. And that is how it has to be. But we must save our women from this onslaught that they have been subjected to. So, Madam President, as I said, I make this brief intervention so that the Minister of Finance, the Minister of National Security rather, can share with us what are the plans, programs, and new measures that are being taken by the government to ensure that we mitigate, if not reduce, the amount of unfortunate situations that face our women folk that allow them to end up as dead persons in our country. We want them to live, we want them to strive, we want them to grow, and we want them to flourish in whatever area of endeavor that they focus on or they pay attention to. So, Madam President, with these few words, I call on the Honourable Minister to share with us, give us an up-to-date status report on measures and initiatives being taken to protect our women folks in our country so that we can reduce domestic violence and reduce the number of murders that we have had so far. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, let me say from the outset that there have been instances where follow-through complaints were not adequately dealt with by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and there have been cases such as that. And the Commissioner of Police is well aware and has taken several measures to treat with those issues. But let me first deal with the whole question of domestic violence, because domestic violence refers to the victimization of a person whom the abuser has or has had intimate, romantic, or spousal relationship. Domestic violence encompasses violence against both men and women. And, Madam President, these behaviors, which can occur alone or in combination, or continually include physical violence, psychological abuse, stalking, non-consensual sexual behavior. Madam President, when we look at the legislation, let me also say that the government of Trinidad and Tobago recognizes that domestic violence is a major area of concern with regards to families, mental and physical health. The government is also aware that if left unchecked, domestic violence can lead to further undesirable societal problems. So we're very conscious of that, Madam President. When we look at the Domestic Act of 1999, the Act aims to provide greater protection for victims of domestic violence in Trinidad and Tobago. The Act also seeks to reflect the population's repugnance to domestic violence in whatever form it may take and further influence the population's attitude and support social change in respect of this social ill. The objectives of the Domestic Violence Act 1999 are set out in Section 2 are inter alia to provide immediate injunctive relief to victims of domestic violence, ensure a prompt and just legal remedy for victims of domestic violence. Madam President, the Commissioner of Police has looked at the Act, and in terms of reinforcing what the Act says, he has taken a very strong measure, as shown by the example done with the situation in Labrador quite recently. And the Act says a police officer shall respond to every complaint or report alleging domestic violence, whether or not the person making the complaint or the report is the victim. Secondly, it shall be the duty of a police officer responding to a domestic violence complaint to complete a domestic violence report, which shall form part of a national domestic violence register to be maintained by the Commissioner of Police. And the Commissioner is looking very closely at this Act and ensuring that there is some kind of follow-through. Thirdly, a domestic violence report shall be in the form prescribed as Form 7 of the second schedule and shall include, but not limited to, the name of the parties, the relationship and sex of the parties, information relating to the history of domestic violence between the parties, the date and time the complaint was received, the type of the abuse and the weapon used, if any. Madam Speaker, this is to ensure that there is a set procedure when such reports are made in any police station to any police officer, so that these rules must be followed through. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service categorizes domestic violence offences as follows: murders, sexual offences, assault, breach of protection order, malicious damage, malicious wounding, psychological abuse, threats, and verbal abuse. Over the last 6 years, Madam President, there have been a steady reduction in the overall total of number of reported cases of domestic violence. Notably, the most significant reduction during this period was a 30% decrease from 1,632 in the year 2015 to 1,141 in the year 2016. Madam Speaker, when we look over a 5-year period, there has been significant decrease in a number of areas. However, that is not to say that treatment of the questions of personnel is not properly well treated, and therefore the Commissioner of Police has looked at certain areas in which he can improve the treatment of police officers when reports are made either to themselves or the respective police stations. A comprehensive manual was developed to assist police officers of all ranks, and this has been developed for some time now. A comprehensive manual was developed to assist police officers of all ranks to effectively and sensitively respond to reports of domestic violence and to take the appropriate criminal procedure measures to prosecute the suspect and thereby protect the victim of domestic violence. The key area which relates specifically to this motion is receiving the complaint of a domestic violence, which goes to Section 3.1 of the manual and outlines the mandatory duties of the police officer when treating reports of domestic violence. The police officer to whom a report of domestic violence is made shall record a report in the station diary or his pocket diary if he is not at the station. Inform the senior second division officer at the station. This is according to Police Standing Orders number 53, Section 6, so that it is laid down step by step as to what the police officer must do. And the police commissioner has insisted that his divisional commanders and all throughout 9 divisions ensure that these are done. Other than that, the policeman will be held responsible. They also should respond to every complaint or report alleging domestic violence, whether or not the person making the complaint or report is the victim. Also complete the domestic violence register as mentioned before, and complete the domestic violence report in the manner prescribed in Form 7 of the schedule. In addition to that, Madam President, Commissioner of Police believe that training is important. Training and sensitization is important. And so he has embarked on training at the various levels from the recruit training all the way to development training across the spectrum of divisional commanders. To that effect, Madam President, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service offers domestic violence training to employees both in the Faculty of Basic Law Enforcement Education and Training and Advanced Law Enforcement Education and Training. The Faculty of Basic Law Enforcement Education and Training offers this training to new police recruits as part of the induction training, and also development training along the promotional courses as they go along. Domestic violence is offered as a module in the behavioral science course at the Police Academy. So that to the effect that for the period 2012 to 2017, a total of 1,640 trainees were exposed to domestic violence training as part of their training programs. They also include in sort of mock trials and mock treatment when sort of skit and during the training period to ensure that the police officers do the necessary thing, following the procedure step by step. In terms of training, you look at the training between 2012, there were 131 persons trained, 2013, 361, 2014, 457, 2015, 297, 2016, 234, 2017, 160. And certainly it will go on to those who enter the training academy for 2018. Madam President, there's obvious room for improvement in the actualization of existing policies in Trinidad and Tobago Police Service for treatment of domestic violence against women. And that is quite evident by the action that was taken. That was quite evident by the action that was taken recently when the police commissioner had to intervene with respect to reports that were made in the library and murder of the family of four and Mr. Scott himself. So that you see, Madam President, there is room for improvement in this regard, and I can assure this House and I can assure the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago that Police Commissioner is working assiduously to do corrective measures to treat this issue, Madam President. Madam President, it is an issue that is on the burner right now, which is one that concerns all of us. Domestic violence against women concerns every one of us as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And rest assured, Madam President, that the Police Commissioner, the Ministry of National Security, the Government of Trinidad and Tobago will continue to do what is required so that this matter can be treated with an effective and efficient manner. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Honourable Senators, the question is that this Senate do now adjourn to Tuesday, the 17th of April, 2018 at 10 a.m. All in favour say aye. Any against say no. The ayes have it. This Senate now stands adjourned to Tuesday, the 17th of April, 2018 at 10 a.m.